For centuries, the stories we told ourselves were about fate, the fulfillment of an identity that was written in the stars. But in 1605, a man named Alonso Quijano did something very modern. He looked into the mirror of a mediocre life and decided that it wasn't enough. By an act of sheer will, he cast aside his name, his home, and his history to basically become a ghost of an age that never truly existed. He didn't just step into a story, he wrote himself into existence, asserting, "I know who I am, and I know who I can be." This is the art of becoming, the radical idea that we're not fixed points in space, but works of art in progress. But inventing itself is a dangerous game, especially when the world is determined to remind you exactly who you used to be. Quixote is the original becomer, a man ill at ease with the world as it is, willing to bleed for a lyrical lie rather than survive a meaningless truth. To see how this man's invention collided with the hard edges of reality, you have to look at the moment his dream first hit a wall. A field of 30 or 40 windmills on the plain of La Mancha. In a dusty, featureless corner of La Mancha, the story begins not with a birth, but with a rebellion. A middle-aged gentleman named Alonso Quijano has spent his nights poring over chivalric romances until his brain dries up. And in that arid headspace, he makes a radical choice. He decides that his mediocre life is not the truth. The truth is a world of giants, enchantments, and noble quests. He renames his skinny nag Rocinante, rebrands himself as Don Quixote, and chooses a local peasant girl who has a famed hand for salting pork to be his peerless princess, Dulcinea. Clad in rusty, ill-fitting armor, he sallies forth to impose a golden age of justice upon a world that has long since moved on. The first major collision between this dream and reality happens on the plains of Montiel, accompanied now by Sancho Panza, a peasant lured by the promise of a governorship. Quixote charges a field of 30 or 40 windmills, convinced they are monstrous giants. When the sails shatter his lance and throw him to the ground, Quixote doesn't admit defeat. He simply interprets the failure as the work of vile enchanters who have robbed him of his glory. It is a mad argument over the nature of reality that continues when he sees a brass shaving basin from a traveling barber. To Sancho, it is a basin. To Quixote, it is the legendary helmet of Mambrino. This is the birth of perspectivism, the idea that truth is not a fixed fact, but a negotiation between two souls on the road. As the journey lengthens, however, the merry confusion begins to curdle into something more disquieting. During a dark night at the fueling mills, terrified by a rhythmic, booming sound, Sancho resorts to trickery. He ties Rocinante's legs to keep his master from riding into danger, then marks the knight's heroic speeches when the noise is revealed to be nothing but industrial machinery. Here, the social hierarchy begins to fracture. The servant realizes that he can use his master's own logic to manipulate him. The tension reaches a crisis when Quixote frees a chain of violent galley slaves out of a misguided sense of chivalric justice, only to have them immediately turn on him and stone him. By the time the second part of the novel begins, the characters discover a terrifying modern reality. They've become celebrities. People have read the first volume of their adventures and now treat Quixote not as a man, but as an object of entertainment. Sancho pulls off his boldest deception yet, pointing to the three ugly peasants on donkeys and telling his master they are the enchanted Dulcinea and her ladies. Quixote, unable to see the beauty that Sancho describes, is plunged into a profound, irreversible melancholy. The roles have flipped. Sancho is now the architect of the illusion, while Quixote is the one being ground down by cold facts. The novel's final chapter transitions from a comedy of errors into a catalogue of cruelty. Wealthy aristocrats, the Duke and Duchess, turn Quixote's life into a series of staged, humiliating pranks for their own amusement. They make Sancho the governor of a fake island called Barataria, where the illiterate peasants, ironically, proves to be wiser and more just ruler than the noble elites who are mocking him. The relationship reaches its breaking point when Quixote tries to force Sancho to whip himself to disenchant Dulcinea. Sancho rebels, pins his master to the ground and asserts a radical independence. I am my own lord. The end comes on a beach in Barcelona, where Quixote is defeated in a formal duel by a young neighbor in disguise. Forced to return home and renounce chivalry, the cure for his madness becomes his death sentence. On his deathbed, he regains his sanity and dies peacefully as Alonso Quijano, the Good. It is a heartbreaking conclusion. Sancho, now the idealist, begs his master not to die and to become a shepherd instead. Quixote dies because his purpose, his meaningful illusion, is gone, leaving him to survive not as a man, but as the golden realm of myth. We often treat Quixote's madness as a medical condition, but it's actually a metaphysical break from a world that has become meaningless. He's the first character in history who is ill at ease with his own existence, claiming the right to be more than what the plot requires. This is why the argument over the basin helmet matters. It teaches us to comprehend the world not as a set of answers, but as a question. Cervantes presents truth as prismatic, something negotiated between individuals rather than handed down by authority. This modernity is further proven by the Avellaneda betrayal. When a rival author published a fake sequel to Part 1, Cervantes was forced his characters to confront this fake news within the text. Quixote had to defend his truth against the counterfeit version of his own life, capturing the general foreboding of an age where facts are fragile and identity can be usurped by misinformation. It moves the story into the dark birth of the market society, where the vulnerable are treated as objects of entertainment. This hideous cruelty reveals that the madman often possesses more instinctive decency than the sane elites, who find vicious fun in his sincerity. Ultimately, the tragedy of Quixote's regained sanity poses the most urgent question of our time. Sanity leaves him hollowed out because too much sanity may be madness when it strips the world of its wonder. It asks us if it's better to live a meaningless truce or die for a lyrical lie. Quixote fails as a man, but survives as the golden realm of myth, a multivalent symbol utilized today to explore the fractures in our own post-truth realities. He remains an analytical instrument for navigating a human condition where we all live in narrative prisons. As we tilt at our own digital windmills, we are reminded of the profound warning. Without these fairy tales, the real world would not be real. In the narrow gap between the two volumes of his life, the man became the book. Quixote was the first hero in history to realize that identity is a negotiation, not a birthright, and that we must defend our truth against every counterfeit version the world tried to impose. 400 years later, he is still on the road, challenging us to look at the rules of the world and dare to break them. He remains the ultimate becomer, a ghost who reminds us that we are not fixed points in space, but works of art, imperfect, unfinished, and entirely our own.